the hardest thing for me when I look back on that time is I would lay in bed, wide awake, 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, whatever it was. And at that time, our oldest was 3 years old. She's daddy's girl. And she'd wake up in the middle of the night and she'd come to our room to have, to cuddle in. And she would always come to my side of the bed. She'd come cuddle in beside her daddy. And, she'd put her arm on her head on my chest, and she'd go to sleep. But I would be stuck in this negative loop just through my brain. And invariably, I would start to think about suicide. I would be, you're just in this dark tunnel. There's no light. There's hopelessness.
Stay tuned. Coming up in this episode, it's part 1 of my 2-part interview with Laverne Friesen, a first responder who is confronting the stigma of mental illness head-on by sharing his first-hand account of how work-related stress was leading him down a dark path towards suicide. But first, let's hear from our amazing sponsor, Midwest Fire. Every day, the hard-working men and women at Midwest Fire build the most reliable firefighting apparatus to be found anywhere. Their customers know a well-built fire engine means lives and property saved. Midwest Fire, a factory direct manufacturer dedicated to helping you extinguish fire before it becomes a raging beast. To learn more about what fuels their passion, visit MidwestFire.com. Hello and welcome to episode 301 of the Situational Awareness Matters show. I'm your host, Rich Gassaway. The purpose of this program is to help to improve situational awareness and high-risk decision-making for individuals and teams who work in high-stress, high-consequence, time-compressed environments with changing conditions. The SA Matters mission is simple. We want to help you and the members of your team see the bad things coming in time to prevent bad outcomes. I'm coming to you today from my office in St. Paul, Minnesota, having been off the road now for 3 weeks, and I'm driving my wife crazy. Today's feature segment is brought to you by the Situational Awareness Matters Online Academy. The Academy trains and certifies your members on situational awareness skills essential for improving high-risk decision-making outcomes. To learn more about this highly acclaimed program, visit samatters.com and click on the Online Academy tab under the Training section at the top of the homepage. Okay, let's jump into today's feature segment, part 1 of my 2-part interview with Laverne Friesen as he shares his first-hand account of how work-related stress led him down a dark path towards suicide. Hey everyone, welcome to the Situational Awareness Matters show. I'm the host, Rich Gassaway, and we are recording an episode of our podcast and video show and simulcasting the show on YouTube. So, or we'll be posting the show on YouTube as well. So if you are joining us on Facebook and you want to engage in the conversation, feel free to type your questions in the feed, and I will share them along with the guest, and you can be part of the conversation. So let me introduce you to the guest that I have today. It's Laverne Friesen. He's from Alberta, Canada. Throughout his career, Laverne has dedicated himself to being well prepared for psychological trauma that comes with being a first responder. But after a seemingly minor incident and a period of prolonged occupational stress, he slipped into a major depressive episode that culminated with suicidal thoughts and severe anxiety. And after hitting rock bottom several times he was able to get the help that he needed with the support of family and coworkers and medical professionals. And Laverne and I met while I was delivering a situational awareness program in Alberta. And he came to the class, and we had an opportunity to have some conversations during the class and on break. And then he followed up with me and said he was willing to share his story and his near miss with us. So Laverne, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So let's start by just having you talk a little bit about your background as a first responder and kind of lay a framework around the conversation we're about to have.
For sure. I started when I was 19 years old. I started working security in a large trauma center. I learned some very valuable lessons there on how to deal with stress. From there, I went into law enforcement, a sworn position as a highway patrol officer. And I enhanced my stress management skills during that period. And at that time, I became a volunteer firefighter as well for just over 4 years. And I thought I had that pretty much licked. I met my wife. She's a victim services advocate, very intelligent and emotionally intelligent lady. And, all those times that, I couldn't talk it out with the crew or, maybe use some dark humor, she was able to help me through the toughest of the times. Sorry?
Did she have a specialty in the area that was able to help you out, or just, kind of help you out through, like love and support?
Well, she's very emotionally intelligent, so she can figure it out. When she was volunteering as a victim services advocate, she had to take some specialized training just to help people through tough times. So, that was a definite bonus for sure.
Okay. And so when the event happened, that kind of was, or a series of events that were they happening in your capacity of serving in the fire service, or was it in your police work, or was it a combination of things that were happening in both fire and police work?
So after I left the highway patrol and the fire department about the same time, and I took a couple-year break. I worked in the private sector, and I resurfaced in a new law enforcement position for an agency here, and everything that happened at that agency.
Okay.
At the new job.
Okay, and so describe some of the normal duties, routine, daily type duties that you would be performing in that new job that you had. What type of policing work was it?
It was mostly traffic enforcement. Here in Alberta, we have several different categories in law enforcement, and I'm a community peace officer. So it's my job is basically traffic enforcement and occasional municipal bylaws, but essentially just traffic enforcement.
Okay. And so talk us through some of the events that were the lead up to your near miss.
Sure. In March of 2017, I conducted a traffic stop on probably the most unreasonable individual that I've ever dealt with in my career. He, gave me some veiled threats on the side of the road, and then he put me on blast on Facebook with some more threats. Normally, I don't think that would bother me too much. However, from seeing his driver's license, I realized he lives right around the corner from me. And I have young children at home. I'm a very active father. We're out at the park all the time. And so I became quite concerned about it. I was quite concerned. And for the first time ever in my career, I started dreaming about a situation that I'd been involved in. And that had never happened to me before. I actually saw the individual about a week later. while I was in uniform and on duty, and I had a minor anxiety attack, just because I was so concerned about everything.
And when he was making these threats, I don't know much about the laws in Canada, but is there any recourse for you, or any actions that can be taken to address that, or to deal with that person who's making those types of public threats, and even if it's on social media?
Well, there is. He was very careful about how he worded them, though, and they didn't quite meet the threshold for criminal charges. So I actually went to my manager, and I asked, or one of my supervisors at the time, and I asked for them to get the municipality's legal team involved to possibly send a cease and desist letter. And at that time, I was scoffed at. They didn't even consider the passing the request along.
Okay. So where did that leave you as far as an action that you could take, or what could you do to protect yourself and protect your family at that point if it didn't?
Well, I think looking back, I went into a bit of a state of hypervigilance. Just every time I left the house, we bought a security system for our house. And yeah, I was basically left to, or I felt like I was left to look out for myself.
And did your wife know what was going on?
Absolutely. I've always been open with her. I knew I've taken critical incident stress management training throughout my career, and I knew that I always needed to be open with her with what was happening at work. And further into my story, I stopped doing that. I'm open again, but it stopped for a while.
Okay. So I assume your kids didn't know really what was going on. Is that fair?
Yeah. Our youngest wasn't even a year old, and the oldest was 2 at the time.
Okay. Were you and your wife proactively doing anything to protect yourselves? I mean, other than the security system, what is it that someone can do when they're under thinly veiled threats?
I pointed out his house to her, and the vehicle he drove. I memorized his license plate, and I could, 2.5 years later, I could still tell you what his license plate is. And I started coming into the neighborhood on different routes. I never came in the same way. I described him to her. He had a distinct build, and tried to protect her that way. And we have a safe code around here, and we always have. If I tell her that she should go visit her dad in Mexico, she knows it's time to leave the area and jump in a car and wait for me to show up.
All right, so progress this along on the timeline as to how things developed or unfolded.
Okay, so that was March. In May, I was fortunate enough to get on a bicycle patrol course, and I started doing bike patrol in the downtown core, and it was the most fun I've ever had at work. Any bike patrol officer will probably tell you that as well. During that time, there was a project that was coming up at work. We all knew it was coming. Nobody really wanted to be assigned it. And I found out that through the rumor mill that I'd been assigned this project. So I went to management and I asked them, and they said, yeah, we've decided that you're the only one that can do this job, which, on the surface may seem really nice, but when you tell somebody that, now you put a ton of pressure on them. And I didn't feel that I had the tools in my toolbox to be completely successful at that.
Mm-hmm.
So I dreaded it quite a bit. At the same time, I've never backed down from a challenge, and so I tried to embrace it. I was quite nervous going in. I asked for a lot of help, and I didn't get the help that I needed. I was asking for, put it this way, if you're an athlete or a professional race car driver, and you're assigned to maybe train somebody else to drive the race car, and you're having problems explaining to that person how to be an athlete and how that relates to driving the race car, when you ask for advice on how to do that, they give you a diagram of what the inside of a race car looks like. That's not really the advice you're looking for. And so I eventually gave up on asking for advice. About 3.5 months into the project, I finally had someone come up to me and ask me how it was going. By that time, it was probably too late. Every day for 3-4 months, I dreaded going to work. I was scared of going to work. I wanted to call in sick, but my sense of duty wouldn't let me call in sick. So it ended up being about 4 months of just this intense pressure that I'd put on myself, and I felt supervisors had put on myself to succeed. And I was very stressed out for 4 months straight.
Okay. And were there other things happening at the same time, or was it all connected to this single assignment that you had? Where and I'd be curious as to where I'm assuming that this dude with the threatening behavior in the background hasn't just disappeared. That's still looming around as well.
No, he didn't. I would occasionally, on my days off, when I felt that I could disguise myself enough in my own personal vehicle, I would drive by his house, just to see. You can see now that I have a beard. I shaved my beard for quite a while. I didn't want him to recognize me. I tried to change my appearances. But yeah, he's there. I know he's around. And it was something on the back of my mind for quite a long time.
Mm-hmm. All right, let me pause for just a moment and tell the folks that are watching this on Facebook Live, if you want to chime in with a question or engage in the conversation, just type something in your comment box, and I'm kind of monitoring that, and I'd be glad to bring those thoughts into the conversation on behalf of Laverne. So feel free to do that. All right, so as you're going through these challenges, is your wife, is she noticing, you talked about her emotional intelligence, is she noticing something is changed or different, or just something unusual in your behavior that is causing her any concern? And is she speaking up? And how's that playing out at home?
She says in hindsight she noticed a change in my behavior. Some of the things, the more immediate things, was on night shifts, I used to come home for supper and put the kids to bed. Take 20 minutes, run in the house, and, have a good night hug and kiss with the kids and be on my way again. I stopped doing that. And one of the reasons I stopped doing that is I didn't want to drive by his house in a marked patrol vehicle. So obviously I did that. I stopped going to the gym. I used to be in excellent shape. I was running every day or 6 times a week. I stopped going to the gym. I started gaining weight. So these are all little things or big things that we're noticing at the time. And we talked about them. We were still at a stage at this point that we're noticing everything and we're talking about it.
Yeah. Now, is it affecting your work performance? And is there anybody at work who's noticing or saying anything, or offering you any kind of an ear to listen, or or what kind of support or lack thereof are you getting at work?
Well, essentially none. I did have a couple of friends that I spoke to frequently. Of course, you don't want to, that your ego gets in the way and you don't want to say exactly how you're feeling. I didn't find that I was getting a lot of support. One of the supervisors did make a comment in jest in front of me, or to me, in front of several other coworkers, and he said something to the effect of, "Your performance is down." And I was pretty angry by that, because I felt that I'd been saddled with this huge burden. Of course, my performance is going to be down.
Hmm. And you didn't engage him in any meaningful conversation about why the performance was down, or you just took the
No.
comment and tucked it away?
Well, I threw a sarcastic comment right back at him, which should have been a sign right there, because I'm usually quite professional and respectful, especially to my supervisors.
All right, so keep marching this along on the timeline here.
Okay, so yeah, for sure. So now we're in end of October, and it's getting to the point where I just can't bring myself to go to work anymore. I'm quite stressed out, and the project's almost finished. So I basically submitted the best that I had, and I went to see it. And then at that time, my wife and I were talking that, maybe I should take a break from work, go on a stress leave, just kind of get a reset. And one night I came home from work, and I was sitting on the couch, and I was with the kids, and I felt, for a lack of a better explanation, I felt like my head was going to explode. I had so much going on. I had headaches, and I couldn't think straight. And so I did a quick Google search. I found counselors, and I started emailing them that evening. And I think the next afternoon, I was able to get an appointment. So I went in, and I told her, I said, "I'm burnt out." And we're all Dr. Google, right? So I Googled my symptoms, and, I'm just burnt out. So I went in there and I told her I'm burnt out. And she said, "Well, tell me your story." So I started talking to her, and she interrupts me after about 15 or 20 minutes, and she says, "You need to get away from work. You need to take some time off." And then she proceeded to tell me all the reasons I needed to take time off. So I took a stress leave. I went to my family doctor to get a note just to put me off. And I thought that I was going on short-term disability. But my work told me that I had to use my sick days. And I didn't have a lot of sick days to use. And between that and there was a course in December that I wanted to go on. And so I only ended up being gone for, I think it was about 2.5 weeks. And even before I came back to work, my wife and I had a conversation, and I told her, I said, "This isn't enough time. I need to be gone until the new year. I need to, I don't feel that anything has changed. I'm not any better. Nothing has changed." And she's like, "Well, do it. And, your health is most important." And I wish that I had, but I didn't. because at this point in my life and my career, I'd been able to, tackle anything that came my way. And quite frankly, I didn't realize what was happening. So I came back in mid-December and I went on a course, and I wasn't any better, and I had no patience. I was borderline insubordinate to my superiors. I'd get an email and I would fly off the handle. I would go into an instant rage, and I would phone my wife and I'd say, "Can you believe this idiot?" And she would have to talk me off the ledge. So really that should have been a pretty big sign that, something wasn't right and I should get help. And I think for sure at this stage, this is a situational awareness issue as well. If you've had this person that's always been a top-notch employee and suddenly they're arguing with you about everything, maybe something's wrong. And so when I came back to work, I had a chat with one of the supervisors, and to lighten my load, or I guess my stress load, they transferred one of my friends onto my shift. And so that happened in January sometime, and we together we tried to really build up team spirit, build a good team, and try to make it the best of what we could. And in Alberta here, they have what's called, Alberta Transportation has what's called the Selective Traffic Enforcement Program. So participating agencies, every month they enforce, or they focus their enforcement efforts on, in our case, distracted driving. And so for the month of February, it was distracted driving enforcement, and kind of rallied the troops on my shift and said, "Hey, distracted driving is unsafe. Let's focus on it this month and let's see what we can do." So anytime we had any spare time throughout the month of February, we focused on distracted driving. And about halfway through the month, I started to feel like my traffic stops weren't going like normal. I've spent my career doing traffic stops, and I felt like I was getting yelled at more than normal, and something just seemed off. And I just couldn't place it. And so we went really hard. We did an amazing job. I'm proud of the team we had. But March 1st came, and as soon as March 1st hit, I had nothing left to give. The tank was empty. I was done. There was just nothing left. I stopped working. I stopped doing anything. I would drive around and drink coffee all day. I've always been a very proactive individual, very hard worker. I didn't care anymore. I just didn't care. There was nothing there. So I realize now, that was when I started to slip into a major depressive episode. About midway through the month, there was an incident at work. One employee played a joke on another employee that wasn't very funny, and it angered a lot of people, including myself. And so I had a chat with the affected employee, and he just kind of shrugged it off. And I said, "Well, that's not acceptable. That's bullying, that's harassment." So I researched bullying and harassment and spent a lot of time doing it. And I sat down to write a complaint letter on behalf of my friend. And I ended up with over 8 pages of incidents that I believed fell into the bullying and harassment category because I felt there was a toxic culture at work. And so I submitted that as my own complaint because I felt I had nothing left to do, and I wanted to change the culture and try to be a leader. Otherwise, I just couldn't see myself working there any longer. So that was a tremendous amount of stress on me during that time. You know, I'm not sleeping anymore. I'd go to bed at night. I'd go to bed late because I knew it wasn't worth even attempting to go to bed earlier. And I would just lay in bed, and this negative cycle would loop through my head. And it started out with, I might have one, if I'd work 5 days in a row, I might have 1 or 2 days in that set where I couldn't sleep. It got to the point where I was going to work on 1 to 2 hours of sleep. And that might be 3 days in a row. I couldn't sleep at all. And the hardest thing for me when I look back on that time is I would lay in bed, wide awake, 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, whatever it was. And at that time, our oldest was 3 years old. She's daddy's girl. And she'd wake up in the middle of the night and she'd come to our room to have, to cuddle in. And she would always come to my side of the bed. She'd come cuddle in beside her daddy. And, she'd put her arm on her head on my chest, and she'd go to sleep. But I would be stuck in this negative loop just through my brain. And invariably, I would start to think about suicide. I would be, you're just in this dark tunnel. There's no light. There's hopelessness. And I didn't see a way out. And so while she was there, cuddled beside me in her safe place, my mind would walk me downstairs to the gun safe, and I would plan out my own demise. And invariably at some point, her breathing would kind of snap me out of it, and I would realize I can't do this. I can't do this to her. I can't do this for my wife. I can't do it for our little boy. I can't do it. And then I would snap out of it, and my mind would tell me, like, dude, you got a problem. And I'm like, no. It'll get better. As soon as the sun comes up, I'll be awake. I'll be good. This will pass. Right? Next night, same thing. Right? And it gets into this incredibly, just horrific cycle. And, I would be there, and I would snap out of it. I'd realize that, I can't end my life. My family needs me. Your kids can't grow up without their daddy. And so then, my peer support or critical incident stress training would kick in and be like, well, call this guy. Well, it's 3 a.m. I can't call him. Well, no, you can call him. He'll answer. He'll answer the phone. And, in hindsight, I could go through my phone list, and there's so many people that I can phone. I can call 3 a.m, and they'd all answer me. They'd all talk to me. They'd all talk me off that ledge. And not only would they, but they'd want to do it. There's people on my phone list that have, prior to me going through this, had told me of their struggles, of how certain calls or how life had affected them. There's people there that are very active in peer support. They're leaders in peer support. These are guys that want to help other first responders. And, I'm proud to call them friends. They would have talked to me at 3 a.m. But I always found a way just to minimize it. And quite frankly, I wasn't honest with myself that I was having suicidal thoughts. I didn't really admit it. I'm like, oh no, you're not, no, that's not, that doesn't qualify as suicidal thoughts. You didn't actually go down there and touch the gun or even look at the gun safe. You're not suicidal, right? And our brains do this to us, and we minimize it when there's nothing to minimize. And so that went on. Well, it started in March and it continued on. On March 1st, I'd found out that I'd been accepted to go to Colorado for a law enforcement bicycle instructor course. And as I said earlier, that was the most fun I'd ever had at work, was doing bike patrol. So, it was a logical step to go into be an instructor. I didn't go, I did go. I almost didn't go. I wanted to back out. I didn't want to do anything for my department. I didn't want to make them look good. I didn't want to do anything for them. And then on top of that, my anxiety was so high that I didn't think that I didn't think my fitness level would be good enough. I was making all kinds of excuses. So one day I was talking to my mother-in-law and she's like, you have to go. It's a free course. Go have some fun on your department. They're paying for it. So I went. Very happy that I went. I met some amazing people. But halfway through the course, I started getting anxiety about coming back to work. And I guess that kind of ties into the other part of the story where I had submitted the complaint about the toxic culture at work. And the end of April, they'd finished interviewing everybody, I guess, covered by that complaint, whether they were a witness or a respondent. And on May 1st, it was discovered that, and I discovered it, that the panic alarm for the patrol vehicle I drove had been disabled. Somebody had opened it up, taken out the internal components, and then put it back together to make it look normal. And of course, my stress at that point went through the roof, as if life wasn't bad enough for me then. I didn't know if it was malicious or if it was just, poor timing. An email got sent out right afterwards, right after I found it on May 1st, and absolutely nobody replied to it. So I went on the bike patrol instructor course, and I had a lot of fun. But like I said, my anxiety was halfway through the course. I was worried about coming back. I came back and I asked around, and nobody had heard anything about the panic alarm from my patrol vehicle. So on May 26th, I sent out another email asking about it. And I got a reply email from one of my managers that was basically giving me heck for not catching it sooner. They're required by law in Alberta. They have to investigate an incident like that. And they hadn't, and they didn't. So I think that was the point that I realized that I couldn't work for that employer anymore. Everything that I described previously, I'm still not sleeping. I'm still having the suicidal thoughts. Like nothing's going my way at this point.
Can I pause you for a second?
Absolutely.
Are you having any conversations with your wife about this and and the thoughts that you're having and such, or are you holding this all to yourself?
So, well, it comes back to me being honest with myself, and can't be honest with anybody else unless I'm honest with myself. I'm seeing a counselor at this time, but I haven't told her that I'm having suicidal thoughts, and I don't want to admit it that I am. I didn't have an understanding of it at that time, and everybody in law enforcement and most first responders can tell you what happens to people that, admit they're having suicidal thoughts. And so nobody in law enforcement is going to, step forward openly and admit that. I was telling my wife all that I would tell her, because she's very emotionally intelligent, and I would tell her, I'm in a really dark place right now. I'm going to a really, like really dark. And she'd be like, I know. And I'm like, no, I don't think you understand. It's a really, really dark place. And she was overwhelmed by it as well. Some of the symptoms that I would have, obviously, I'm depressed. The only thing I can think about and talk about is work. My world has literally closed in around me. I'm not having discussions with her unless it's about how much work sucks. She describes it as well, and one of the I found out much later, my psychologist called it hostility. And that's a harsh word. That's a very powerful, strong word. But I would slip into hostile moods where I would hate my wife for a week at a time. Then I'd love her for a day sometimes, maybe a week, 2 weeks, but for no reason. And I never, ever was able to figure out a trigger. I would just hate her. And she knew it. And I would never admit it to her. But she calls it the entity that used to live with us. She could open the door when she came home from work, and she would know whether it was me in the house or the entity in the house. And that's kind of how she describes it. It's like this black wall that just moves into your house, this black cloud. It's just horrible. I wouldn't wish it on anyone, and it was quite hard for her and me as well. And kind of an interesting memory from that time, I was sitting on the couch one day, and our little boy, who was he wasn't quite 2 years old at that time, he's standing beside me, and he's looking up at me with this big smile on his face, and he's going, "Daddy, daddy, daddy," and he wanted to show me something. And I'm looking at him, and I don't feel anything. And I remember thinking, this should be the happiest time of your life. What's wrong? And, I knew something was wrong, but I was seeing a counselor. She told me, she's like, oh, it's situational. You get out of it, you'll be happy. I wasn't being honest with myself. I wasn't being honest with her. So I don't think that counseling was having its full effect at that time. I don't think it could have. So after I got back from Colorado, I ended up bumping into a colleague of mine that he's a firefighter, and kind of ran into him a few times over the years. And I ended up talking to him for 3 hours and just chatting about stuff. And I don't know, I've never actually went and talked to him about it. So I don't know if he knows that I was going through a rough time or if he sensed something. But for the first time in months, I saw a glimmer of hope. And, I just felt that maybe I can actually get through this. So about a month later, I ended up applying for a different job, very similar position, but just with a different municipality. And I managed to get hired. And going through the process, I was very hard on myself. I had to keep telling myself, don't let your true emotions sneak through, right? At that time, I had a lot of rage, a lot of anger and rage towards certain people. And so I got hired, and I thought, awesome, now everything's going to be better. And I was happy. I was a little bit relieved, but I still felt off. And I couldn't understand, I thought I should have been happier. I thought I just should have been a happier person, but I wasn't. But, work was really good. And so that part was good. So, and I talked to a couple of friends, and one of my friends who's retired and he has PTSD, he's like, time will heal it. You'll get better with time. You just got to give it time. So, all right, we'll try that. It didn't, though. I still had the hostility towards my wife. I didn't have the depression as much, but something was still off. And so that was August that I started the new position. And after I resigned, sorry, I'm going to backtrack you here a little bit. And with respect to the panic alarm, I was in a unionized environment, and management had always told me that, you're a leader here. We need you to be a leader. And they kind of created this us versus them mentality against, so kind of basically pitting hardworking guys like myself against the union guys, right? The guys that need the union. So May 26th, I got the email saying, basically giving me heck for not finding the panic alarm disabled earlier. So after some consideration, I went to the union, and I said, this is what they're doing. They haven't investigated this or anything like that. So they filed a grievance on my behalf. And on June 19th, we had a meeting, and there were several members from HR, Human Resources there. My manager was there, and a couple of union representatives were there. So we did a round of introductions, and I said, all right, Laverne, tell us what's bugging you. And I didn't even finish my first sentence. I was crying uncontrollably. I've never cried like that before as an adult. I hope I don't ever. I couldn't keep it in, and I had to leave the room, and I cried for probably 5 minutes. I couldn't even get my thoughts together.
Thank you again to Laverne Friesen for sharing your amazing story. Remember, this is part 1 of a 2-part episode, so be sure to check back next Tuesday for the conclusion of this powerful story. In case you weren't aware, I launched this show in 2014 with a purpose: to give a platform to those who've had near-miss events to share their stories. When I'm on the road delivering situational awareness classes, attendees often share amazing near-miss stories with the class. Those stories motivated me to launch this podcast, so those lessons learned could be shared with a bigger audience, you. The Situational Awareness Matters show, podcasted as SA Matters Radio, and our companion video program, SA Matters TV on YouTube, along with other videos we have posted there, have enjoyed more than 1 million views, listens, and downloads. I am so honored to provide this free platform for these incredible lessons to be shared. If you like the show, please do me a solid favor and subscribe. For the audio version of the show, search and subscribe to SA Matters Radio on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, or iHeartRadio. For the video version of the show, search and subscribe to the SA Matters TV channel on YouTube. Since 2007, our instructional team and consultants have helped more than 1,300 organizations and have trained more than 86,000 individuals to improve high-risk decision-making, including fire, police, EMS, industry, military, business, medical, utility, transportation, aviation, energy production, biotechnology, and more. If someone you know works in a high-risk, high-consequence, decision-making environment, we're here to help to improve their safety and to help them accomplish the most important mission of all, and that is to go home from work whole and healthy every day to the ones who love them. I'd like to take a moment to honor and thank some of our recent program and consulting clients. The Florida Fire Chiefs Association, ExxonMobil North American Operations, Sandoval County Fire and Rescue, and Albuquerque, New Mexico. If you're interested in attending a program, here's where we're going to be upcoming. On January 8th at the Novelis Corporation in Oswego, New York. January 11th at the Lincoln County Fire Chiefs Association in Denver, North Carolina. January 30th at the Evans Fire Department in Evans, Colorado. February 5 at the Miami Valley Fire and Rescue Conference in Dayton, Ohio. February 7 and 8 at the South Carolina Fire Chiefs Association in Columbia, South Carolina. And February 24 through 27 at Firehouse World Conference in Las Vegas, Nevada. If you want to see the locations of all the upcoming events, just head over to our website, samatters.com, and click on the red tab labeled Upcoming Events Schedule. This tab is about halfway down the homepage. If you're interested in talking with me about conducting a situational awareness assessment for your team or hosting a training program, just click on the Contact Us tab on the top of the homepage, and I'll give you a call. And remember to check out the show notes for how to subscribe to our free newsletter and how to follow us on social media. There we share ideas about how to improve situational awareness, how to make better decisions under stress, and how to improve the skills of critical thinking and resilient problem solving. Well, that's it. Episode 301 of the Situational Awareness Matters show is complete. Thank you again to my guest, Laverne Friesen. Thank you to our platinum sponsor, Midwest Fire. Thank you to our feature segment sponsor, the Situational Awareness Matters Online Academy. And thank you to our associate sponsor, Chief Miller. And most importantly of all, thank you, the listeners and viewers of this show, for sharing some of your valuable time with me today. I really appreciate your support of the SA Matters mission. Be safe out there, and may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters radio show with Dr. Richard B. Gassaway. If you are interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit samatters.com. If you are interested in booking Dr. Gassaway for an upcoming event, visit his personal website at richgassaway.com.